Didn't say goodbye. My mother just turned away from me, walked back into the kitchen, and started washing dishes. Like I wasn't standing there with a duffel bag and nowhere to go. Like I hadn't just told her the most terrifying thing I'd ever said out loud in my life. My father was the one who spoke. He said, "You made your choice." That was it. 7 years of working 2 jobs to put myself through nursing school, 3 years of night shifts at Mercy General, and all I got was 4 words through a screen door before it clicked shut. I stood on the porch for a minute, maybe 2. I don't actually know. I kept thinking someone would open the door back up. That this was just the first reaction, the shock reaction, and in a few minutes my mom would come out and say, "Okay, let's figure this out." But the porch light went off. They turned off the porch light while I was still standing there. I was 28 years old and I drove to a gas station parking lot and sat in my car and cried until I couldn't see the steering wheel anymore. I should back up. I grew up in a small town outside of Columbus, Ohio. My parents were the kind of people who went to church twice on Sundays, had opinions about other people's choices, and believed very strongly that their daughters should do things in the right order. School, then career, then marriage, then children. That was the plan. That was always the plan. And for a long time, I followed it. I became a registered nurse at 25. I moved into an apartment in Columbus with 2 women I worked with at the hospital. I dated, but nothing serious. My parents were proud of me. My mother bragged to her friends at church. That felt good. I won't pretend it didn't. Then I met Derek. Derek worked in pharmaceutical sales. He was charming in that way that seems impressive before you understand what it actually is. He knew how to make you feel like the only person in the room. We dated for 8 months. I thought I was careful. But careful isn't a guarantee, and one Tuesday morning in February, I sat on the bathroom floor at my apartment and stared at 2 pink lines and felt the floor shift under me. I called Derek first. That call lasted 4 minutes. He said he wasn't ready for this, that we hadn't been serious, that he couldn't be sure it was his. That last part landed like a slap. I hung up and didn't call him back. Then I called my sister. My sister Diane is 3 years older than me. She's a high school history teacher in Dayton. She and her husband have a small house with a yard and a dog named Biscuit and a guest room with a pull-out couch that has seen better days. When I told her what was happening, she was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Then she said, "Do you need me to come get you right now, or can you drive yourself?" That was her whole reaction. Not judgment, not a lecture. Just, what do you need and when do you need it? I told her I could drive myself. She said she'd have dinner ready. I didn't tell my parents right away. I thought I had time to figure out how to say it. I thought maybe if I had a plan, stable job, savings, a clear picture of how I was going to handle this, they might respond with something other than what they eventually responded with. I was wrong. I told them on a Sunday afternoon in March, 6 weeks after I found out myself. My mother's face did something I'd never seen it do before. It sort of collapsed inward. My father put down his coffee cup very carefully, like he was trying not to break it, and then he looked at me like I was someone he didn't recognize. They asked about Derek. I told them he had made his position clear. My mother asked if I was going to try to change his mind. I said no. She said she didn't understand how I could be so calm about this. I wasn't calm. I was terrified. I just wasn't going to perform the version of this scene they wanted from me. My father said that I had embarrassed them. That word, embarrassed. Not that they were scared for me. Not that they were worried. Embarrassed. The conversation ended. They didn't throw me out exactly. They told me they needed time and space to think. Then 2 weeks later, my mother called and said that they had decided they couldn't support this decision and that they thought it would be best if I gave them some distance. I asked what that meant in practical terms. She said they wouldn't be available to help with anything. I said okay. I hung up, and I didn't call them again. Here's what nobody tells you about the first trimester when you're working 12-hour overnight shifts. Everything smells wrong. The hospital smells, the cafeteria smells, the hand sanitizer, the coffee in the break room. Everything makes your stomach turn, and you just have to keep moving because there are patients who need you, and you can't stop to be sick every 40 minutes. I pushed through. I had to. Mercy General had decent health insurance which covered my prenatal care. Ohio doesn't mandate paid maternity leave for private employers, which meant I was looking at whatever I'd saved plus FMLA unpaid time. I had about $6,000 in savings. Not nothing, but not enough to not be scared. Diane called every few days. Sometimes she'd just call to talk about nothing, which I appreciated more than I could say at the time. Her husband Tim would get on the phone and make bad jokes, and somehow that helped too. They drove up twice to take me to appointments when I didn't want to go alone. Around month 4, the apartment situation got complicated. One of my roommates was moving in with her boyfriend. The other was transferring to a hospital in Pittsburgh. The lease was up in August. I was due in October. The math was not working. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't ask them for anything. Diane called on a Thursday night, and I mentioned, trying to sound like it wasn't a big deal, that I was going to need to find a new place before the baby came. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're moving in with us. Don't argue." I argued anyway. Their house had 2 bedrooms. The second one was their office/guest room. Tim was already driving 40 minutes each way to work. It wasn't fair to them. Diane said, "Leah, you're my sister. Stop it." Her using my name like that always meant she was done discussing something. I moved into their guest room in July. I slept on that pull-out couch for the last trimester of my pregnancy. It was lumpy, and one of the support bars dug into my hip no matter how I positioned myself. But Diane had put a lamp on the nightstand with a soft bulb, and she'd hung a print on the wall that I'd always liked from her old apartment, and it felt safe in a way that nothing had felt in months. My daughter was born on October 14th. I named her Sophie. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. She had a full head of dark hair, and she looked at me in the delivery room with an expression that seemed almost confused, which I understood completely. Diane and Tim were in the waiting room. When the nurse brought Sophie out for them to see, Diane cried. She'll deny this, but she absolutely cried. Tim took about 40 photographs in 2 minutes on his phone. My parents did not come. I went back to work when Sophie was 10 weeks old. I wasn't ready, but I had no choice. Diane watched Sophie on the days I worked. She refused to let me pay her. I tried 3 separate times, and she refused every time. Tim converted the office into a proper nursery, not just the guest room, an actual nursery, with a real crib and a blackout curtain and a little white dresser with butterfly handles. He did it over a weekend while I was on shift. I came home to it Sunday morning and stood in the doorway and couldn't say anything for a long time. 18 months in, I filed for child support through the Franklin County Child Support Enforcement Agency. I had a lawyer, a woman named Sandra, who had an office above a dry cleaner on High Street and who had handled enough of these cases that nothing surprised her anymore. Derek had moved to Cincinnati by then. He was still in pharmaceutical sales and, as Sandra discovered, making significantly more than he had admitted to during our initial filing attempt. He contested. Of course he contested. It took 14 months. 14 months of hearings and paperwork and depositions and Derek's lawyers sending documents designed to make me look unstable and financially irresponsible. At one point, they tried to argue that because I was living with my sister, I had reduced expenses and therefore needed less support. Sandra took that argument apart in about 6 minutes. The final order came through on a Wednesday. I was in the parking garage at Mercy General when Sandra called. I had just finished a 10-hour shift. I sat in my car with my badge still clipped to my scrubs, and she read me the numbers. 31 months of back support at a calculated rate plus ongoing monthly payments. I won't go into every detail, but it was enough. It was more than enough. It was the kind of number that makes you sit very still and breathe very carefully because you're afraid that moving will somehow disturb it. I called Diane. She screamed, actually screamed into the phone. I heard Tim in the background asking what happened and her saying, "Seichi won," and then him making a noise I can only describe as a victorious honk. Sophie was 2.5 years old by then. She had Diane's laugh, which made no biological sense, but somehow she'd picked it up from spending so much time with her. She called Tim TT, which had started as toddler mispronunciation and had by that point become permanent. She was walking and talking and had opinions about which cup she wanted her juice in, and she was the best thing that had ever happened to me, and I had almost let fear convince me otherwise. I started looking at apartments. 2 bedrooms this time, something that was actually ours. Diane cried again when I told her. She also immediately started sending me listings, so the crying was not from any desire for me to stay. It was a Saturday morning in November, 11 days after the support order came through, when Sophie and I were eating cereal at Diane's kitchen table and the doorbell rang. Diane went to answer it. I heard her say something, heard a voice I hadn't heard in 2.5 years answer her, and then the kitchen went very still in the way that kitchens do when something important is about to happen. My mother walked in first. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was grayer. She was holding her purse in front of her with both hands like a shield. My father came in behind her. He'd lost weight. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Sophie looked at them from her booster seat. She had milk on her chin. She said, "Hi." I didn't say anything. I waited. My mother looked at Sophie for a long time. Then she looked at me and her face did that thing again. The thing it had done when I told her I was pregnant, except this time it didn't collapse. This time it sort of broke open. She said, "She looks like you did when you were little." I still didn't say anything. My father cleared his throat. He said that they had been thinking about things for a while, that they had been wrong, that the way they handled everything was wrong. He said it the way people say something they've been practicing, carefully, with no breathing room, and I realized he probably had been practicing. Both of them probably had. I asked them what they expected to happen now. My mother said they just wanted the chance to know her, to know Sophie. I looked at my daughter, who had gone back to eating her cereal with complete indifference to the adult drama happening around her. She was 2.5 years old, and she deserved grandparents who showed up. She also deserved a mother who protected her. I told them that I was glad they came, that I had needed them to come, even if it had taken this long, but that I was going to need them to understand something. Sophie would know who had been there from the beginning. She would know who the guest room and the lumpy pull-out couch and the butterfly dresser handles belonged to. She would grow up knowing that her family is made of people who showed up and that showing up is the only criteria. My mother nodded. She was crying, which I hadn't expected, and which I had no real response to. My father looked at the floor. Then Diane came back into the kitchen with extra coffee cups and the specific expression of a person who has decided she is going to be civil if it kills her, which I recognized immediately and loved her for completely. We sat at the table for 2 hours. Sophie let my mother read her a book. By the end, she was sitting in my father's lap, looking at his watch with the focused curiosity she applied to all objects that seemed interesting to her. He looked like he didn't know what to do with his hands. He looked like he was scared to move and break the moment. I understood that completely too. I signed the lease on our apartment 3 weeks later. 2 bedrooms, 2nd floor, a little balcony that looks out over a parking lot but gets good afternoon light. Sophie's room has a window she can already almost reach. I hung the print Diane gave me in our living room, where I can see it from the couch. Diane and Tim are 12 minutes away. They have dinner at our place on Sundays. Sophie has started calling it Sunday dinner at our house, with a proprietary pride that I find both hilarious and deeply moving. My parents call. We're taking it slowly. Sophie will grow up knowing them and knowing what slowly means and knowing why. What I know now that I didn't know when I was standing on that dark porch with a duffel bag is this. The people who turn the light off on you tell you something true about themselves. And the people who leave a lamp on for you, soft bulb, no questions, tell you something even truer. I got lucky. I got Diane. Sophie looks like me apparently, and she has Diane's laugh. I think that's exactly right. I keep thinking about that porch light going off. Not the doorbell 2.5 years later, not the court order, not the number Sandra read to me in the parking garage. The porch light, that's the image that stayed, because it wasn't dramatic. It was just a switch, just a small decision someone made from inside a warm house, and somehow that small thing told me everything I needed to know about what was coming and what I'd have to build without them. Here's what I've learned about cause and effect since that night. It's rarely loud. It doesn't announce itself. It just accumulates. My parents made 100 small choices before that Sunday afternoon. Choices about what mattered, about what shame meant, about what a daughter owed them versus what they owed a daughter. And all of those choices added up to a porch light going off. And my sister Diane had made 100 small choices too in the opposite direction, and all of hers added up to a lamp on a nightstand with a soft bulb and a print on the wall that she knew I loved. We don't usually get to see that accumulation happening. We just see the result and call it a surprise. What carried me through wasn't any single moment of bravery. It was something quieter than that. A decision I made over and over to keep going anyway. To show up for my shifts when the hospital smells made me sick. To file the paperwork even when Derek's lawyers were designed to make me feel small. To accept help without letting it hollow out my sense of what I was capable of. That last one was the hardest. There's a particular kind of stubbornness that disguises itself as self-sufficiency, and I had to learn to tell the difference between protecting my dignity and just being too proud to let someone love me correctly. Diane loved me correctly. She didn't fix things for me. She just made sure I wasn't doing them alone. I also had to be smart about it. Not book smart, but the kind of clear-eyed practical that comes from understanding your actual situation without softening it for comfort. I knew what I had saved. I knew what FMLA meant and didn't mean. I knew that Derek's initial numbers didn't add up and that Sandra could prove it. Knowing those things clearly, without panic and without wishful thinking, made every hard decision possible. Fear makes you fuzzy. Clarity makes you functional. And the doing right by people part, that's the one I want Sophie to understand when she's old enough. Not as a rule, as an observation. The people who treated others as problems to be managed eventually stood at a kitchen doorway holding their purses in front of them like shields, hoping to be let back in. The people who treated others as worth showing up for, Tim converting that office into a nursery over a single weekend, Diane refusing my money 3 separate times. Those people ended up at a Sunday dinner table with a 2-year-old in someone's lap and a dog named Biscuit and a life that felt, genuinely, like enough. Sophie will grow up knowing this story, not as a lesson I lecture her with, just as the truth of where she came from and who was there. I think that's the most honest thing I can give her,